Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Using my sportscasting background, I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players to gain more insight on what makes this team go. As the Detroit Lions enter a new gritty era, we'll look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In today's episode, we're going to discuss the upcoming NFL draft, the possible picks we want to see, what we want to be avoided, and what we think the Lions might actually be doing. I'm joined today by Chris Haynes, a friend of the podcast. In addition to being an avid Detroit Lions fan and University of Michigan football fan, he also dives extensively into fantasy football. Thanks for joining the show today, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Glad to be here.
Of course, the news came out to end last week that 4 Detroit Lions players have been suspended, 2 of them for a year. Those players are Quintez Cephas and C.J. Moore. They've also been released by the Lions. Jamison Williams and Stanley Berryhill are both wide receivers. They get a 6-game suspension due to gambling, not on an NFL game, but by placing bets from an NFL facility. In our last show, we talked about this briefly and how it could impact the NFL draft. Now we're previewing the draft as a whole. There are 2 things to consider with the draft here, Chris. Who can help us now? And who do we need to be thinking about for a long-term need? So let's start with the fun stuff. What would we love to have happen? What's starting with like that first round? What's something you would love to see happen?
Well, obviously we need to address the defensive line. I think corner we could address corner as well, losing Jeff Okudah due to the trade. But I would love to see Jalen Carter at pick number 6. I think he's the best player in the draft at that position, best player on defense possibly. He has his character concerns, but he was brought in for an interview by Brad Holmes, and he came out of that looking a little bit better off than when he went in. So if we could have Jalen Carter there at 6, I would love that. And then my wish would be at pick 18 to go get Bijan. I'm a big Bijan fan. I think that would just set us up for at the running back position for 4 or 5 years, and he's just a special talent. If we score more than the other team, we win the game. If our defense has already gotten better, our offense was good last year, but Bijan could be that big difference maker that makes sure that we always outscore the other team. Yeah,
I can't disagree with those things. My hope or wish is perhaps a little different. My biggest want, if I could have it my way, I would have the Detroit Lions trade back. I'm hoping maybe like Will Levis is there at 6 and some team wants him, and we can maybe move back to 8 with Atlanta, maybe even 11 with Tennessee, although I kind of want to stay in front of the Bears at 10 there. But if we could move back a few spots and pick up like an extra 3rd-round pick or something, that would be ideal. In that scenario, I would probably pick somebody like Devin Witherspoon, defensive back from Illinois. Sure. He seems to be the top guy that is going to be in that position. We've already reloaded the position, but only for a year. A number of those guys are going to be gone, or their contracts will be up after a year. So he would be a big help for the future. So that would be my preference. I don't know that that'll happen. And then with that 2nd pick in the first round, you and I must have the same affinity for Bijan Robinson, because if he is there, I want him because of how much of a game changer he can be. Mm-hmm. I want the Lions to take a running back this year, and he just seems to have such a unique skill set that sets them apart from the others that I think he's worth taking there.
Yeah, I agree with trading back. If Jalen Carter's not there, we got to do something. I think maybe at that position 6, Witherspoon's probably too much of a reach at that point. Maybe someone will want to trade up and try to draft a quarterback, but I'm seeing all the odds now are saying that Will Levis is the best odds at pick number 2, and C.J. Stroud's dropping now. One mock draft I just looked at had him dropping out of the top 10, going 11 to Tennessee. So if that's the case, then we're going to have one of those better defensive players at the top if Will Levis goes ahead.
And, if Bijan Robinson isn't there at 18, because that's the other thing, too, is we don't know if he'll make it to 18.
Right.
I wouldn't take him at 6, but 18 would be ideal. If he isn't there, though, that's where I would consider to take whoever the best defensive lineman or offensive lineman is on the board. Now, obviously, if we went with someone like Jalen Carter in the first round, with that first pick in the first round, that's where I'd want to go defensive back at around 18, which has been a very common theme throughout much of the offseason. Mm-hmm. But at that point, you're still looking at a guy like Joey Porter Jr.
Yep.
Or Devontae Banks. I think either of those guys would be amazing. I honestly think the top 4 defensive backs are guys you really want. I think there's a little separation after those top 4. But if we are going defensive line or offensive line at that point, Miles Murphy, Brian Brisset, both out of Clemson, defensive tackle, defensive end. Those guys could be great picks right there, or somebody else along the offensive line.
Yeah, so if Carter's not there at 6 and we're not in love with Bijan, because Tennessee might be moving on from Derrick Henry, and I could see them going and taking a stab and trying to pick up Bijan, or possibly someone trades up and gets ahead of us for Bijan. But if at 6 we go with Witherspoon, or we trade back a couple and get Witherspoon, I would love to see us get Kalijah Cansey from Pittsburgh at 18. I think he's just a run stuffer. He's been graded well. He would really shore up that defensive line for us.
Definitely. I definitely like the idea of adding a defensive tackle there at the 18 spot if Bijan's not there and we've taken a defensive back earlier in the draft. So moving on to round 2, I've got my wants, or my hopes would be offensive line and tight end. I really like Darnell Washington out of Georgia. He's 6'7", 270 pounds. The dude's huge. And there's a ton of tight end talent in the draft. Now, I've said this before. You and I have spoken about this before. I still think James Mitchell could take a big step forward this year.
Sure.
I don't think there's a huge need for tight end like most people are classifying us to have. But with such a deep class, it almost seems foolish to pass on somebody here if we can get a great value grade on them and not reach for them early.
Yeah, when I look at Washington too, I don't look at him as a tight end. He's an extra offensive lineman. He's just a big man, and what he would actually do is get upfield when we're throwing a screen pass or a dump off to our talented running backs. Then we can actually get them out in space, and he's going to be able to free up some more holes in the secondary.
And then also in the second round, I guess I would like a running back in this round if we don't get Bijan in round 1. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs seems to be a great person to pair with David Montgomery. He's got a little bit smaller, a little bit quicker skill set, but he might go early round 2, so we might not even get a shot at him in round 2.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not overly concerned with who we take. As long as we get somebody in round 2 or 3, I just want to see the potential added to the roster.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs would definitely be a good addition to our offense, because we know we're not going to re-sign Swift after this year, and he's a lot like Swift. He's a quick twitch guy. He can get out in space and he can hit that home run. If we wind up drafting him, maybe then we can move on from Swift. Maybe we can pull off a trade in the draft. Maybe pick up an extra 3rd round pick for Swift and just cut ties with him.
Yeah, and that's pretty amazing that we get 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks this year. I mean, that is very fortuitous. We have a 3rd-round pick. What I would want to see in the 3rd round is, what didn't we get in the first 2 rounds? Fill in the gap. Maybe we go offensive line. Maybe we go running back at this point. Maybe a linebacker goes right.
Yeah,
here.
I like linebacker. Drew Sanders out of Arkansas would be a wise pick. Jack Campbell out of Iowa. Those 2 guys would definitely fulfill a need that we have, and maybe then we can get out of the nickel, so we're having to run the nickel all the time.
Yeah, definitely adding somebody at linebacker, I think, is something we need to do, preferably in the draft, but even in free agency if we still have to go that route. Later round picks, like right now we've got 2 5s and 2 6s, but trades happen. We could go anywhere from 4 to 7. The things I'd like to see us do in late rounds, a backup quarterback for sure. That's where I'd like to see this. I've mentioned it before on the show. Brad Kaya from Miami, a 6th-round pick in 2017. It's the last time Detroit drafted a quarterback. It is too important of a position to not take somebody here at least every few years. And there is now a need. So I guess the 2 that jump out to me later, and I don't know how late this is, but Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA.
Yep.
And I'd even be okay with like Tanner McKee out of Stanford. Ultimately, I just want to see the Lions draft somebody.
Yeah, Tanner McKee's going to be more of your prototypical quarterback. He's going to be a lot more like Jared Goff and what we have for our system, whereas Dorian Thompson-Robinson, where he's a little bit more mobile. So might have to change things on the offensive line a little bit schematically, just try to roll him out, get him throwing on the run, trying to get him out into space and making decisions, read options with Montgomery.
And honestly, both of those guys could be great fits. One, like Goff, you don't have to change the system much. Dorian, if he comes in, he's different. You could have a little change-up thing. We've seen teams do this all around the NFL.
Yep, absolutely. Another guy I like late is Max Duggan. I mean, might as well throw him in there in the 7th round. That guy's a big guy. He ran all over Michigan's defense in the bowl game, for the semifinals. He's a winner. If you have someone that you want to come in the fourth quarter because you got an injury and you just need him to just pick up first downs, I think he's the guy because he's willing to put his body out there. He runs the ball. He's got a pretty decent arm. He'd be a big pickup for us, I think, in the 7th round.
Yeah, I am so hoping that they draft a quarterback to bring in. I'm sure they're going to. I'd actually be surprised if they don't.
Yeah, if anything, I mean, you're bringing in a quarterback to compete, but also to kind of fill those preseason games. So you're not having to have Jared Goff go out there and play 2-3 quarters. You could bring him in for a couple series, get his feet wet, get the rust, shaken off, and then you have 2 quarterbacks coming in and fulfilling the rest of the preseason games. So that way we don't have to worry about injury.
And then the other position that there's a couple, but the one that I really want to see us take is a wide receiver late in this draft. I think if there was any doubt about it, that doubt's gone. We're definitely drafting a wide receiver. A couple guys that stick out to me is Rashee Rice out of SMU. I'm not sure how late he will go. It might be earlier than later, but he is a guy that's got some talent around him. And if you wanted to take a really late flyer, I got a homer pick here for you. A player like Dante Demas from the University of Maryland. He could be worth a look. His stock dropped quite a bit due to an ACL tear 2 years ago. He was the most pro-ready player in the Maryland offense at that point. He played last year, but he was still recovering. I think this could be one of those diamonds in the rough where you get somebody late. And I'm just going to throw a couple names out there. DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, right? Both came out of the University of Maryland. Sure. So there's a little bit of a reputation right there. But I'm thinking those are a couple wide receiver possibilities that stick out to me. Who are some that you were looking at?
I like Nathaniel Dell out of Houston. I think he would fulfill that need that we need as a burner. And we could go with a hometown pick and Jaden Reed from Michigan State. We don't really know what his talent is because the quarterback at Michigan State has been kind of inconsistent. So I think he's a talented receiver, and he could fulfill that over the top need that we're going to be missing with Jameson Williams gone for 6 weeks.
Yeah, because he's got some speed, and like you said, there was so much inconsistent quarterback play there. You don't really know where his ceiling is.
Right.
So if there's one other thing I want the Lions to do this year, and I think probably every Lions fan would agree with this, is I want them to draft a kicker. I know we brought Mike Badgley back, and that was important, and I'm glad we did. But we also need to bring somebody else in. Now, there's not a lot of long-distance kickers coming out of this draft, out of this college class.
No, usually not. They're usually never a long-distance kicker. They usually kind of develop that right after they come out of college in their first year when they're actually working out with NFL trainers.
So the 2 guys I like are a bit of homer picks, right? You got Michigan's Jake Moody and Maryland's Chad Ryland. Now, Ryland also kicked at Eastern Michigan for 4 years. Mm-hmm. So those seem to be 2 of the top prospects coming out. I'd be fine if the Lions got either of these guys. Moody appears to be one of the most accurate kickers, and Ryland seems to have one of the better legs coming out for distance. So I want them to bring one of these guys in, compete with Michael Badgley, and see what we got.
Yeah, they got to at least put a little bit of pressure on Badgley, so that way he stays to form. We brought Moody in. I know if you try to do any mock draft, it's always an F pick if you ever pick him in front of the 6th round, but Moody's accurate. And we don't need him to be a long range kicker because he's not going to be kicking against the wind too much playing in a dome. So
it's a good point. And actually, I think Moody is mocked to go the earliest of all the kickers, possibly rounds 4 or 5.
Round 4 or 5, yeah.
All right. So we talked about the guys we'd want, things that we were hoping would happen. What do we want them to avoid? Now, I don't think there's a lot of things here that I could say I don't trust them with. And what I mean by that is, I think the Lions they're gonna vet a lot of these guys out. Mm-hmm. And you see it every year that a team makes a head-scratching move. And oftentimes that team might be the Raiders. Mm-hmm. But I'm not expecting any of those things to happen here. But let me talk about the Wills. All right? We got Will Anderson here. Getting Will Anderson would be pretty amazing. But I would prefer the team to not trade up to get Will Anderson. And it's likely that's what you're going to have to do if you want Will Anderson.
Right.
And I would welcome that talent, and it would be solid, and you wouldn't hear me complain, but my disappointment would be we'd probably have to give up a 2nd-round draft pick to move up there to get him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we just made all these moves to get this draft capital, and then you're going to go trade it away just to go up 3 spots or 4 spots. That doesn't make sense to me.
And the other Will is Will Levis. I don't want the Lions to take him at 6.
No. Will Levis would be a terrible pick there. He's got a good arm, but he has zero presence. He has zero peripherals. I would picture him coming in and being like David Carr back in the day and setting the record for sacks in a season. I know we have a good offensive line, but I mean, he just has no peripheral vision, and he's just going to get hit.
Well, the interesting thing is we might not even have a chance to take him because a lot of people think Indianapolis wants him at 4. I'm just saying if he's there at 6, let's try and find someone to trade with us.
Yeah, if someone wants to go ahead and trade for him, I would welcome that for sure, especially if we're only going to move back 1 or 2 spots. Maybe the Falcons at 8, maybe Tennessee at 11 would be fine as well.
Are there any other things that you can think of that you want the Lions to avoid doing in this draft?
Well, I want them to avoid taking a quarterback or a wide receiver at 6. I know wide receiver at 6 is pretty high, but Lions have made that decision a couple times in the past. Only worked out once for them, really. I want them to avoid taking the best player available that doesn't have the best character. We have a culture going here in Detroit. We got to keep that culture right. We can't take somebody in that's going to be a distraction to our team and take away from what Dan Campbell has built.
I would echo those exactly. I would say anyone who has character questions. I believe the Lions have done their homework. I think they know the important questions. I think those have been answered. And then especially in light of recent events, it probably just solidifies it that much more that they're going to be very careful about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you lose 4 players, you guys do your homework on these guys, and they brought 30 guys in, and hopefully they went through their evaluation process and found out, more importantly, who they don't want to take than who they do want to take.
For sure. And now let's talk about who we think they're going to take. Now, as we said, there's 2 things to consider in this draft. Who can help the team now, get us better this year, and who do we need for the long term? Also, General Manager Brad Holmes did such a great job of addressing some of the biggest and immediate needs in free agency. There's a really strange flexibility for the Lions going into this draft. Plus, the other variable is drafting at 6 is much different than drafting at 2 last year. There's a lot of things that are going to happen before we get there. So they're also saying the biggest immediate needs are arguably defensive tackle, linebacker, tight end, offensive line depth, and a backup quarterback. So I'm thinking the Lions are likely to go defense with their first pick. But of course, this depends on who's fallen and who is there.
Yeah, I would also throw cornerback in there. We have Mosley on a 1-year deal, 2-year deal.
1-year deal. We have got Mosley on a 1-year deal.
Got Mosley on a 1-year deal. We don't want the cover Baron back at the square one again next year. Yeah, so getting rid of Okudah. Mosley's on a 1-year deal. I think cornerback in the first round, 6 or 18 makes a lot of sense. Like I said, you don't want the cover to be bare.
Though I firmly believe the Lions are going to draft a quarterback this year, and they should. I expect it to be a later one. But if Anthony Richardson is on the board at 6, I'm going to say it would not shock me to see them draft him. Now, that could also be a great trade back situation as well. But I just want to put that out there. Even though I don't think they'll take a quarterback early, if Anthony Richardson is there, I do think there's a sliver of a chance.
I would say less than 5% on that one, just because his athletic ability doesn't fit our mold of our offense right now. Jared Goff is a pocket passer, and Anthony Richardson hasn't thrown a lot of passes in his career. Our offense is built to pass and then grind out runs. Our quarterback isn't going to be running. When your offense is built a certain way, you don't want to change it up just for a quarterback at pick 6. So that's one where you can trade back or take the best available defensive player at that point.
And if the defensive players have been taken, that is a great spot to trade back. I do think, like you said, most likely defensive line is what we're going to see. The other position we've been looking at is defensive back. Witherspoon, Gonzalez. Which guy do you favor? I'm a big Devin Witherspoon fan. I love the physicality of his play. Those seem to be the top 2 defensive backs right now.
Yeah, so I like Witherspoon. Witherspoon is long. He's athletic. He can cover a bigger receiver. With Gonzalez, I'm not sold on him. Gonzalez has only really had 1 good year in college. He transferred from Colorado, and from his 2 seasons there. Went to Oregon, had 4 interceptions, but before that in Colorado, he didn't have any. He only had 10 passes defended at Colorado total over 2 years.
So if the Lions do take a defensive back at that 6th spot, I would like it to be Witherspoon. I think we both thought we don't really want them to do that, but we think there's a chance that could happen depending how the board falls. If they go defensive line up there, Deontay Banks and Joey Porter Jr., PFF has them as the 3 and 4 defensive backs. Those would be great for the Lions to get at that 2nd pick, thinking longer term, pairing them up with Cam Sutton. It could bring stability to the secondary. If they don't go defensive back at 18, I think if Bijan Robinson is there, I think they consider him. I don't know if they will. They could go defense, both picks in the 1st round with defensive line and defensive back. Just not sure which order they do that in. But I think if Bijan Robinson's there, they're going to give it a serious consideration.
Yeah, I like Bijan there. I already said that once here, but it's it's taking your offense to the next level. He's definitely a game changer, and he's going to be a game changer here for 3 or 4 years before we have to think about re-signing him to an extension. He's Saquon Barkley light. He's just shifty. He's fast. He's powerful. He make up a huge difference in our offense. If we don't take a corner in the 1st round, then I think, looking to the later rounds, maybe take another hometown pick, maybe go after DJ Turner. DJ Turner was shut down. He played at the biggest stage, and he showed out. He shut down whoever he was lined up across. Playing in the Big Ten, there's some big time receivers. Ohio State receivers didn't play well against him.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's definitely defensive back talent that goes deep into this one. Even if you don't get one of those first 4 guys, there's definitely talent we're taking in the 2nd and 3rd round. And I could see the Lions totally taking somebody there depending on those 1st round selections fall. Yeah,
Cam Smith out of South Carolina is another one. Another one is Keely Ringo out of Georgia. Going up against the best of the best in the SEC, lining up across potential NFL wide receivers. He's got a lot of talent too, and he's played in some big games. So I think that's another one that we can look at in the later rounds.
And if we haven't taken care of the defensive line yet, that gap could be filled in. And maybe a guy like Mozzie Smith even?
Yeah, Mozzie Smith, he came on strong over the last 2 years at Michigan. Really solidified the defensive line for him.
And as we talked about what our wants were, I definitely see the Lions looking at a linebacker at some point. I also see them looking at a tight end. And a guy's name that I would keep an eye on, and I don't know if they make it to the 2nd round, but is O'Cyrus Torrence, the guard out of Florida. He could be a 2nd round pick. If we got him in the 2nd round, that might be a good thing. We know the top 3 guards on our roster are free agents after this next year, and it's going to be a need. And O'Cyrus Torrence is listed as possibly the top guard coming out of college. I know the Lions scouted down at Florida a few times. A lot of people thought maybe it was for Anthony Richardson, but it might have been for O'Cyrus Torrence. We don't know.
Another defensive lineman that I look at late in the draft, maybe taking the 5th, 6th round on it, is Maury Ojomo from Texas. He's just a big beast in the middle of their defensive line. He's been rated pretty high by PFF. Not sure why he's fallen, but that's another guy that we can take a look at later on. Even if we take someone in the 1st round, we can still get a rotational piece with him.
In the later rounds, that's where I think they're going to draft the best player available. That's one of the nice things we have is we're not trying to plug holes like they were the 1st year, even the 2nd year on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
We see a quarterback and a wide receiver in this draft for sure, probably in the later rounds. Hopefully grab a kicker by the 7th round or bring somebody in undrafted, but always a little more certainty when you got somebody before the draft is over.
Sure. And then another thing to remember is this is going to be a team that could look for those first cuts for that teams have. There's going to be teams trying to dump some salary, maybe try to get a little bit younger, try to sign some of those draft picks, and there's going to be some casualties from that. So that's where the Lions can swoop in and maybe pick up a receiver that's been proven, or maybe a special teams guy to make up for CJ Moore that we just lost.
Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's how Philadelphia got C.J. Gardner-Johnson last year.
Yep.
Is he was released due to salary, and they got him on a pretty solid deal.
Right, exactly. And the Lions are in the position with the salary cap, with what we have left in our salary cap, to be able to go and sign somebody like that.
That's great, and we're a destination people want to come to as well. So that's definitely a good area to keep an eye out and see how we plug a last-minute hole or so with that.
Yeah, destination maybe not for the weather, but just for the culture fit with Dan Campbell, and we've seen it now. DJ Chark last year took a lesser deal just to come play for Dan Campbell, and we're seeing it with CJ Gardner-Johnson this year. He wants to come play for Dan Campbell, so he's doing some good things down there, and hopefully going forward, this is going to be a place that free agents want to come.
All right, well, Chris, thanks for joining the show and talking NFL draft. It's going to be a real exciting week.
All right, thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.
And thank you folks so much for tuning in. Please subscribe to Not the Same Old Lions podcast to get alerts about new episodes. Also follow the show on Twitter at Matt Soltesiak. You can also check it out on YouTube. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.